Welcome to Opened Scrolls. Today we open the book of Esther, a story that proves God can move through quiet rooms as powerfully as he moves through loud battles. Esther was not born into royalty. She had no army, no title, no safety net. She was an orphan, raised in exile, living as a foreigner under the most powerful empire of her day. And yet she was chosen. Not by accident. Not because beauty alone can save a nation. She was positioned by divine purpose for a moment when silence could cost everything. This story begins in a palace, but it is really about a hidden war. While kings drink from golden cups and officials whisper in corridors, an entire people hangs in the balance. And the weapons God uses are not chariots or swords. The weapons are fasting, faith, and the courage to speak when fear says stay quiet. If you have ever felt like you do not belong, if you have ever wondered why your life landed where it did, Esther speaks to you. Because the question she faces is the same question we face in different forms. Will you protect yourself, or will you step forward? Will you stay hidden, or will you speak? Will you trust that God is at work even when he seems silent? In the days of King Xerxes, the empire stretched across 127 provinces, from India to Ethiopia. From the royal city of Susa, the king ruled with absolute authority. He wanted the world to see his greatness, so he hosted a feast that lasted 180 days. It was a parade of wealth and pride. And it set the stage for a chain of events only God could weave in to rescue. Nothing here was random. When those 6 months ended, the king opened the palace gates to the people of Susa and held another banquet for 7 days in the garden courtyard. Wine flowed without restraint, and the mood turned reckless. Queen Vashti held her own feast for the women inside the palace, a separate space with dignity and order. On the 7th day, when the king was warm with wine and swollen with pride, he made a demand that revealed the heart of his kingdom. He ordered that Vashti be brought before the guests wearing her royal crowns so they could admire her beauty. He did not ask for her wisdom. He did not ask for her voice. He asked for a display. Vashti refused. In that single word no, she drew a line the empire did not expect. She would not be paraded before a drunken crowd. Her refusal struck the king like a slap, not because his command was righteous, but because his ego was fragile. Public defiance in a royal court is dangerous, and Xerxes felt humiliated. He called his advisors the men who knew the laws and the customs, and one of them warned that Vashti's defiance would spread like a spark. If the queen can say no, every woman might say no, and the men feared losing control more than they feared injustice. So they urged the king to remove her and issue a decree across the empire, declaring that every man should rule his own household. And so a royal edict went out to every province, and Vashti was dethroned. It felt like politics and pride, but heaven was writing a rescue plan. Because in the emptiness Vashti left behind, God was preparing a place. The palace was searching for a queen, but God was positioning a deliverer. As time passed, the king's anger cooled, and the absence of Vashti lingered in the palace. His advisors offered a solution. Gather the most beautiful young women from every province, prepare them, and let the king choose a new queen. Messengers rode across 127 provinces, and young women were brought to Susa. Among them was a Jewish girl named Hadassah, known by her Persian name Esther. She was an orphan, raised by her cousin Mordecai, a Jew living in exile. Mordecai had taught her to fear the Lord and to survive with wisdom in a foreign land, and he urged her to keep her identity hidden. In a kingdom where power shifts quickly, being known as a Jew could become a target. Esther was taken into the palace and placed under the care of Hegai, the keeper of the women. And something happened that the story repeats like a drumbeat. Esther found favor. Not because she demanded luxury, but because her spirit carried humility and grace. God gave her favor in the eyes of those around her, and Hegai treated her with unusual kindness. For 12 months, Esther was prepared like the others, a year leading to one night in the king's presence. When her time came, she did not arrive with arrogance. She entered with quiet strength, and when Xerxes saw her, he was captivated. He loved her more than the others and placed the royal crown on her head. A banquet was held in her honor. Gifts were sent. A holiday was declared. The empire celebrated a new queen, but the empire did not know who she truly was. A Jewish orphan now lived behind palace walls. Not to be served, to serve, not for comfort, for calling. God was writing in invisible ink. Esther lived quietly in the palace, listening to Mordecai. One day, Mordecai overheard a plan. 2 guards plotted to assassinate King Xerxes. Mordecai acted at once and sent word to Esther. Esther warned the king and named Mordecai. The conspirators were exposed and executed. The king's life was spared, and Mordecai's deed was written into the royal chronicles. But Mordecai received no reward. No public honor, no promotion. Just ink on a page. Then Haman the Agagite rose to the highest rank among the officials. Everyone was ordered to bow, but Mordecai refused. Haman burned with rage. When he learned Mordecai was a Jew, his hatred widened into a plan to wipe out every Jew in the empire. Haman cast lots to choose the day, then approached the king with deception. He spoke of a certain people scattered through the provinces, and he claimed they did not keep the king's laws. Xerxes handed him the signet ring, and a decree went out across the empire. On the 13th day of the 12th month, every Jew would be killed. Mourning erupted. Jews fasted and wept everywhere. Mordecai tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and cried aloud in the streets. Esther heard and sent a messenger to ask why. Mordecai urged her to go before the king and plead for her people. Esther answered with fear. No one may approach the king uninvited. The penalty is death unless he extends the golden scepter. And she had not been called for 30 days. Mordecai sent back words that shake the heart. Do not think you will escape in the palace. If you stay silent, deliverance will come from somewhere else, but you and your family will perish. And who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Esther chose faith over fear. She sent word to Mordecai. Gather the Jews in Susa, fast for me for 3 days. Then I will go to the king, and if I perish, I perish. On the 3rd day she put on her royal robes and stepped into the inner court, the place no one entered without being summoned. She stood still, waiting. The king looked up and saw her. Instead of condemning her, he extended the golden scepter. Esther touched its tip, and mercy opened the way. The king asked what she wanted, offering even half the kingdom. Esther did not rush. She invited the king and Haman to a banquet she had prepared. They came. The meal unfolded, but Esther held her words. Before it ended, she invited them again for the next day, promising she would reveal her request then. That night the king could not sleep. He ordered the royal chronicles to be read aloud. In the reading, a forgotten entry surfaced. Mordecai had exposed the assassination plot, yet he had received no honor. The king asked what had been done. The answer was nothing. Just then Haman arrived, planning to ask permission to hang Mordecai on a gallows he had built. But the king summoned him first and asked what should be done for the man the king delights to honor. Haman imagined the king meant him. He described royal robes, a crown, the king's own horse, and a parade. Then the king delivered the turning point. Go at once and do everything you have said for Mordecai the Jew who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything. So Haman, humiliated, led Mordecai through the streets, proclaiming honor for the man he hated as God moved every piece into place. When pride rises, God can flip the script in seconds. The next day, the king and Haman returned to Esther's banquet. Once again, Xerxes asked what she wanted, promising it would be granted. Esther took a breath and stepped into the moment she had been fasting for. She spoke with courage, not for luxury, but for life. If I have found favor in your sight, O king, grant me my life and spare my people. We have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated." The room changed. The king's face tightened with shock and anger. Who is he, and where is the man who would dare do such a thing? Esther turned and pointed. "The enemy and adversary is this wicked man." Haman Xerxes rose in fury and left the banquet to cool his rage. Haman's confidence shattered. He began to beg Esther for mercy. In panic, he fell toward the couch where she reclined, clinging to her as if desperation could rewrite justice. At that moment, the king returned and saw the scene. His anger exploded. "Will he even assault the queen while I am in the house?" The guards seized Haman. One of them mentioned the gallows Haman had built for Mordecai, and the king ordered it done. Haman was hanged on the very gallows he had prepared, and the plot of destruction collapsed under its own weight. The king then gave Haman's estate to Esther, and Esther placed Mordecai over it. Xerxes took the signet ring from Haman's hand and put it on Mordecai's hand, lifting the faithful man who had been ignored. But the danger was not finished. In Persia, a decree sealed with the king's ring could not be revoked. The day marked for death still stood on the calendar. Esther had won the king's ear, but her people still needed rescue. Still looming. Esther approached the king again. She pleaded for her people. "How can I bear to see disaster fall on them?" Xerxes granted permission for a new decree, one that could answer the first without breaking Persian law. Mordecai summoned the scribes and wrote in the king's name. "The Jews in every city may assemble and defend themselves. They may stand together against any attack." The new decree raced across the empire, sealed with the king's ring. Hope returned where mourning had lived. On the appointed day, the Jews stood united. Officials supported them, and the enemies who expected bloodshed found resistance instead. Across the provinces, many who hated the Jews were defeated, and in Susa, the attackers fell as well. The story makes a point that matters. The Jews took no plunder. Their fight was not greed. It was survival. It was justice. What had been scheduled as a day of death became a day of deliverance. When the danger passed, the people rested and celebrated. To remember the reversal, they established a yearly feast called Purim, named after the lots Haman had cast to choose the day of destruction. Every year they would rejoice, share gifts, and give to the poor. The date meant for grief became a date for joy. Mordecai was honored throughout the empire, second only to the king. But his greatness was not power, it was heart. He sought the good of his people and spoke peace and truth. And here is the wonder of Esther. God's name is never mentioned in the book, yet his fingerprints are everywhere. In the dethroned queen, in the chosen orphan, in the sleepless king, in the forgotten record, in the perfect timing. What was meant for destruction, God turned into salvation. God still reverses. Esther's story speaks loudest when life feels quiet, because many of us look for God only in obvious miracles. But Esther teaches us to look for him in timing, in favor, in doors that open, in danger that misses. God may seem silent, but he is never absent. Esther also teaches us that position is responsibility. She could have stayed safe behind the walls, protected by the crown, hidden by secrecy. But Mordecai's words force the real question. Will you stay silent? Deliverance will come, but you may miss your moment. And Esther answered with the kind of faith that costs something. I will go, and if I perish, I perish. There are moments when God invites you to speak, when it would be easier to blend in. Moments when the right thing is risky. Moments when obedience demands courage. Your palace may be an office, a classroom, a family table, a group chat, a friendship, a decision no one sees. But the question remains, are you there for such a time as this? And when you feel small, remember who Esther was. An orphan in exile, a foreign girl in an empire. Yet God turned her place into a doorway of salvation. He can do the same with you. He can take what feels like a random season and reveal it as preparation. He can take a threat and turn it into a testimony. He can take a day marked for sorrow and turn it into joy. If this story encouraged you, subscribe to Open Scrolls for more Bible stories told clearly. Share this episode with someone who needs courage. And leave a comment telling me where you feel God has placed you for such a time as this. Until next time, stay faithful and keep opening the scrolls.